Ancient manuscripts have always held secrets, but perhaps none as disturbing as the one silently lying between the lines of the Book of Enoch. Long before our modern concept of extraterrestrials, there were already accounts of beings who descended, beings from above, who were definitely not human. What no one imagined is that these supposedly symbolic records could contain clues to our true origin, an origin that defies everything we thought we knew. The story begins when Enoch, an ordinary man, is suddenly taken by creatures of shining appearance, eyes of fire, and skin that was not skin. He describes their wings, but he also describes machines that cut through the skies with deafening sounds. For his time, it was the only language he had, the only way to translate something that seemed impossible. The truth is, he was facing something that surpassed his comprehension and, perhaps, it still surpasses ours. During his journey, Enoch is led to a kind of celestial observation room. There, he is told that humanity was not an accident. We are the result of an intervention. Something shaped us, something altered us, something breathed life into us, not in a mystical way, but in a planned, calculated one. He witnesses the Watchers, beings who fell in love with the very creation they helped to shape. And then, the primordial sin of this story emerges, the decision of these beings to mix with humans, generating hybrid descendants, giants, titans, creatures that modern archaeology still struggles to explain with fragmented evidence. But the true secret begins to reveal itself when Enoch realizes the Watchers did not act alone. Behind them was something greater, an ancestral species, a race that didn't live in a theological heaven, but in a real, deep, and unknown cosmos. Enoch tries to describe their presence, but his words fail him. They were light and shadow at the same time, he wrote. They had a voice without a mouth and a thought that pierced the mind like a blade. They weren't just observing humanity, they were correcting something, preparing something. And it is at this point that the revelation begins to take a terrifying shape, one that would change everything if we could fully understand it. When Enoch finally understands why he was taken, the impact almost destroys him. He wasn't facing divine beings in a religious sense. He was facing the architects responsible for manipulating the emergence of humanity. You were not born from dust, one of the entities tells him. You were born from us. They explain that Earth already harbored primitive life forms, but these forms lacked the necessary essence to generate a conscious species. So they decided to intervene, not to create, but to enhance. They ignited something within our ancestors. Enoch watches as they show him images or perhaps projections of what humanity would have been without this intervention. Instinctive creatures, without language, without morality, without memory. Then comes the phrase that echoes throughout the entire book. We gave you the fire of knowledge, but you burned the world with it. But the most disturbing part was still to come. Enoch discovers that the Watchers who supposedly fell in love with humanity didn't do so out of affection. It was out of genetic curiosity. They wanted to see just how far they could push the limits of their hybrid creation. The birth of the giants, the Nephilim, wasn't an accidental disaster. It was an experiment. An experiment that spiraled completely out of control. Earth began to suffer. Species became unbalanced, and the world became a battleground for beings who should never have coexisted. It is then that the superior race makes its final decision to erase everything and start over. But before that, they needed to preserve a part of their experiment. Enoch would be the messenger. He was chosen to carry the truth forward, even knowing the world wasn't ready to understand it. What he never fully understood was why he was the one chosen, until one of the beings reveals, because you carry a mark. You are the only one among them who possesses the pure spark. This phrase haunts him. Enoch tries to understand. A spark of what? Pure in what sense? But before he can even formulate the questions, the next vision is shown to him, a vision of the future. Not just of the Great Flood, but of what would come thousands of years later. And, surprisingly, humanity was not alone in this vision. The beings show Enoch something he never managed to clearly record in the scrolls: the return. A time when humanity, too advanced to be ignored, would be visited again by its creators, not as saviors, not as gods, but as evaluators. They explain that, in their understanding, every artificially created civilization must go through 3 stages: awakening, expansion, and self-destructs. Enoch asks which stage humanity was in. The answer terrifies him. You are between expansion and self-destructs. That is why we will return. He tries to warn his people, tries to decode his visions, but the words are too confusing to express such a complex reality. And so, the Book of Enoch becomes a fragmented, symbolic, and incomplete record. The most important part was never written down. The most terrible truth was never spoken. Enoch kept the secret until his mysterious disappearance, taken to heaven, as it's recorded. But in reality, he was removed so that he would never reveal what he shouldn't. But here's the part many people ignore. In one of the Ethiopian manuscripts discovered centuries later, an almost illegible phrase appears as if it had been scratched out countless times. They will return when humanity discovers their altered origin. For a long time, this was dismissed as a metaphor. But a recent discovery conveniently omitted from most official studies reignites the enigma. Fragments of human DNA present a sequence that does not belong to any known terrestrial organism, a sequence that looks inserted. And this is where the surprising ending is revealed. We are not just the descendants of the beings who walked with Enoch. We are the experiment that was never supposed to continue, an experiment they planned to interrupt. The only reason we still exist is because one of the watchers, the one who believed humanity deserved his own destiny, hid the genetic key that would allow the superior race to locate us again. According to ancient tradition, this key was lost forever. But now, thanks to modern science, it has been found. And if the scriptures were correct, they already know where we are, and they are coming back. Thanks for watching. What do you think about this theory? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to follow for more secrets hidden in plain sight.